Hello friends, welcome. Friends, we all know that the government of India has come out with a new Telecommunication Act. This is replacing the old Telegraph Act of 1885. Now, this Telecommunication Act is replacing the current model of licensing to authorization. So there are different types of authorization. One is service authorization and this is network authorization. Now, the difference between license and authorization is that when an operator wants to operate a service under the licensing regime, it has to sign up a contract with the government of India. Means both the parties have to sign a contract agreement. Whereas in case of authorization, no such contract agreement is required to be signed. Government is only going to issue an authorization under a certain terms and condition under the banner of a authorization model for a particular class of service. That is in net what the difference between license and authorization is. Now friends, if you look at the government of India's attempt to come out with separate classes of authorization, your head will start boiling. You will get so much confused that you will not be able to understand what is going on. So this document which I am, displaying before you is the latest document of deliberation between TRA and DOT on the terms and condition of network service authorization. So this is going on for a long period of time. There are volumes of documents, some 1,000 pages of document. I don't think anybody has got the stamina to read through this document. Now friends, why I am doing this video today? Now this video I am doing because when I was going through this document, if you go to page number 86. There are many things to be discussed in this document. I am not going to discuss everything in this document. I am going to go straight to page number 86. And I'll tell you that how confusing this whole issue about satellite communication networks, authorization has become. So look at this B, matter related to proposed authorization of satellite communication network provider under section 31B, which is network service authorization. Now, if you read this, you will get terribly confused. I got terribly confused when I was reading through this. And I found most of the discussion is completely unnecessary. Completely unnecessary because it is confusing the shit out of the whole thing, because the whole concept of satellite networks are totally different from the objective of this authorization that the government of India is talking about. It is not required at all. And probably TRI initially said this, and the DOT, I don't know why they did not agree. Now, I don't want to go clause by clause what DOT is saying, what TRI is saying, because if you start reading this document, I can guarantee you that you are not going to understand a single sentence what is being discussed here, right? Because it is so confusing. So friends, what I've done is, I have created a separate slide deck and I'm going to tell you why this authorization, which is satellite network authorization, communication. What is this called? Again, I all forget all these terminologies, right? Let me just go straight here. It is called satellite communication network authorization is not required at all. Why it is not required and what principles are being discussed here to prove this point. Okay, so let's talk about this in this slide deck. So context and trigger. The new Telecommunication Act splits service under this clause, which is 31A, and network under this clause 31B, authorizations, two sets authorization. DOT floated satellite communication network under 31B for SCS, supplementary coverage from space. What does supplementary coverage from space means? See, you have already terrestrial network available, which are being operated by the TSPs to provide 4G and 5G coverage. Now there are coverage holes, and those coverage holes can be met using satellite communication network in tandem with the terrestrial network, so that you have got ubiquitous coverage throughout the country, right? So that's the whole idea. TRI's principle was spectrum is with service license, parity with terrestrial. Kind of agree with TRI because it has to be very simple. You can't really start giving spectrum to the network service operator, right? If you at all need one. The service layer should actually be given the spectrum because it is directly communicating with the consumer. Debate escalated. Do we need an SCN means satellite communication network under the network service authorization. It is so confusing, friend. You will break your head. I don't know why why government of India gets into a debate like this. What we already have, let's talk about very principally, step by step, logically, and you will understand this in a very simple way, that why we are confusing this whole thing. Look, we have a UASL license, in Universal Access Service license, which the terrestrial operators are using to provide terrestrial services, 4G, 5G services, 2G, 3G also. And then we have got another license under the earlier regime. I'm talking about, these are all under the earlier regime. This is called GMPS license, where you can use it to provide all kinds of satellite services, including satellite phones and broadband connectivity. And therefore, if you see Starlink and OneWeb and others, they have already taken the GMPS license. Okay. Then there is another, license handled as condition under the GMPS, not a new license. So why SCS creates unnecessary complexity? Let me explain. Category confusion. If you beam, so what is the purpose of supplementary coverage from space? The purpose of supplementary coverage from space, which is the objective of this satellite communication network, is to provide connectivity on commercial phones, mainly commercial phones. It may not be, but primarily it is on commercial phones because you are meeting the coverage holes. So if it is beamed to phone, it is access, it is not network. Simple as that. If you are beaming to commercial phone, it has to be access. How can it become network? Then we have split accountability. Spectrum holder is not equal to retail obligation holder, right? Overlap with GMPS, because GMPS already empowers you to provide connectivity to phones. It can be sat phones, it can be commercial phones. You already have that. So why you need a separate license? It duplicates existing satellite scope. Administrative burden, arbitrage cause more confusion. More license, more dispute, little benefit. Now, there is one more most important thing one people have to understand. Now, there has been a debate between satellite operator and the terrestrial operator, and this debate has been going on for ages. What is this debate? The terrestrial operators have been saying that the satellite operator should be given spectrum through auction, right? And that satellite players are telling the terrestrial players, no, satellite spectrum is a shared resource. It can't be auctioned. So all the IMT bands means the bands which are currently being used by cellular service providers. They are being used to offer cellular services, which is 5G, 4G, etc. Right? Correct? You agree with me now? Now, if supplementary coverage from space service has to be provided, then a satellite player has to access these IMT bands, right? Because it is actually extending the cellular coverage. So if these bands are already with the existing mobile service provider, how can the satellite service player get access to these bands? They can only get by leasing spectrum from the existing mobile service providers, because these are exclusive spectrum. You can't give this spectrum to a satellite communication network separately, because it will be a complete waste of capacity, because these are exclusive spectrum. Now, satellite players like Starlink, they can use spectrum in a shared spectrum. Like we have got Ka band, Ku band, and you can also use L and S band. L and S band at a lower frequency and Ka and Ku band at a higher frequency. These are all shared spectrum band. These can't be given exclusive. Now, if a GMPS licensee wants spectrum in any of these bands, then it has to apply to the government. Look, I want spectrum. Please give me spectrum in L and S band or Ka-Ku band. The government already has finalized the process, or in the process of finalizing a spectrum allocation method to the satellite players. So they will give you spectrum here, right, to a GSM. But they can't give spectrum to a IMT band to a satellite player, because that spectrum will become completely inefficiently used, because these are exclusive spectrum and they are very, very vital spectrum to be used by the mobile operator in an exclusive manner. If satellite player is given IMT bands, then that band is going to get destroyed, because they will never be able to extract capacity from this spectrum, because the number of satellites are limited. When you have got so many base stations, you can deploy on ground to leverage the full capacity of these bands. Feeder gateway, no issues. That is absolutely out of the question. So no direct IMT to satellite players. Therefore, it is very simple. You have a license, GMPS license. You need spectrum. You go to the government directly to take spectrum. If you want to run an IoT service or any other service, a broadband service, take spectrum from the government. Rules are clearly defined that the spectrum will be a shared resource. It has to be given administratively. If you want to do supplementary coverage from space, go to the mobile operator and have a lease agreement with the mobile operator. The government should come out with sharing rules, leasing rules, where a satellite player can lease spectrum from mobile operators. FCC is doing the same thing. Exactly the same thing which FCC, US regulator is doing. So I do not know why this confusion has been created. SCS to commercial from how it should work. Spectrum holder, USL, keeps IMT. Satellite role, GMPS provides space spectrum capacity. Mechanism sharing, leasing between USL and GMPS. DOT's rulebook, geographic, QS handover, outage, LI, emergency, KYC, billing. That's all is the responsibility. Now, IoT and non-public satellite use LSKA KU shared band under GMPS, no exclusivity. It is a shared spectrum. Interconnect with USL only if public numbering emergency touchpoints are needed. Right? Keep licensing light, rely on coordination and device certification. So migration, no regulatory gap because you have already an UL GMPS. You migrate to GMPS authorization under this 31A. So what is the regulatory gap the TRAI is talking about and the DOT is talking about? I do not really understand what is going on. Preserve full service scope, phones via SCS tie-up, IoT dedicated terminals, gateways via GMPS conditions, TCs, space approval, not a separate license. Issue migration circular, no service disruption. Accounting, now this is important, accounting and consumer protection. Now what will happen if you are going to tie up with a IMT provider for accessing the IMT spectrum to provide supplementary coverage from space, then the revenues are going to be licensed separately or going to be charged separately for license fees for the satellite players also and the IMT players also, because IMT players are going to collect some percentage from the satellite players. So there has to be some pass through. Otherwise, the service cost is going to become very, very high. Retail obligation stays with the entity billing the user, usually the USL for SCS. Because somebody has to integrate the billing, right? You can't tell the satellite operator you bill separately. But USL will bill and the satellite players are going to collect money from the USL. That's how it is going to happen. But satellite players are giving access directly to the phones. You can't create two separate entities for billing. It will create a huge confusion. Clear SLA, or you can actually do it if you want to. Let the satellite players bill on the phone separately also, and the UL player basically can share revenue between each other. That model also can be done. Clear SLA for QoS, emergency services, lawful intercept, and data retention. Decision map in one glance. Service on IMT phones. If you want to give service on IMT phones, USL holds IMT spectrum. You have to lease capacity for supplementary coverage from space. There is no other way, because this is the commercial spectrum on which phones are operating. You can offer emergency services on commercial phones, like for example, Apple is doing, right, in US using S-band, L-band or S-band, right, and a global. It is using a global star spectrum. So that model is also possible, but that is also an access. That's why I'm saying the billing can be either by the satellite players or by the mobile players. It can be decided based on who takes the responsibility, but there has to be some kind of clear-cut demarcation as to for audit that the license fees are not charged for both the players on two times. Now, services via satellite bands to replace on phones IoT, GMPS shared MSS and FSS. Gateway is handled under the GMPS condition. Therefore, SCN is not needed. Policy do's, minimal and actionable. Notify spectrum sharing leasing code for USL GMPS. DOT has to come out with spectrum sharing rules. Public's migration circular for UL GMPS authorization. Standardized pass-through accounting consumer protection mapping. reaffirm no direct spectrum assignment to satellite operators. So bottom line, don't create SCN. Keep spectrum and obligation aligned. USL IMT, GMPCS MSS and FSS, which I already told you, LNS, SNL, L band and S band, and then K and KU band. Stitch between with clear sharing and leasing rule for fast rollout and zero confusion. That's all, friends. I do not know why this debate was going on between the TRAI and DOT. There have been so many things, if you see this, if you read this para, you'll get terribly confused. There is no need for them to come out with a separate satellite network authorization under the network authorization regime. Thank you, friends, for your time. I hope that you like this video, and I'll come back with a new video on a new topic next time. Thank you very much, friends, for listening till the end.